expressed optimism that all the hostages will soon be home. Netanyahu signaled strong support for the Trump peace plan for Gaza, describing it as a very significant achievement for Israel. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Addressing the nation last night, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel is on the verge of a very significant achievement, and he hopes to announce the return of the hostages held by Hamas very soon.
אנחנו על סף הישג גדול מאוד. זה עדיין לא סופי. אנחנו עובדים על כך במרץ, ואני מקווה בעזרת השם שבימים הקרובים, עוד במהלך חג הסוכות, אוכל לבשר לכם על השבת כל חטופינו, החיים והחללים כאחד, בפעימה אחת, כשצה"ל נשאר בעומק הרצועה ובשטחים השולטים בה.
Ahead of mediated negotiations due to begin in Cairo, Netanyahu said that he instructed the Israeli negotiating team to make the process as short as possible, noting that President Trump will not tolerate stalling tactics, delays, or evasions by Hamas.
אני הנחיתי את צוות המשא ומתן בראשות השר דרמר לצאת למצרים כדי לסגור את הפרטים הטכניים של שחרור חטופינו. הכוונה שלנו, והכוונה של ידידינו האמריקנים, היא לתחום את המשא ומתן הזה בימים בודדים. ושמעתם את הנשיא טראמפ הערב. הוא אמר בבירור, לא נסבול לו תרגילי דחייה, משיכת זמן או התחמקות מצד החמאס.
In his address, the Prime Minister outlined the phases of the agreement, reiterating that the first stage will see the immediate release of the remaining 48 hostages.
בשלב הראשון, החמאס ישחרר את כל חטופינו, וכוחות צה"ל ייפרסו מחדש באופן שצה"ל ימשיך להחזיק בכל השטחים השולטים בעומק הרצועה. אני שומע שיש כאלה שאומרים היום שהחמאס היה מוכן כבר לפני שנה או אפילו לפני שנתיים לשחרר את כל חטופינו מבלי שניסוג נסיגה מלאה מהרצועה. טוב, אני אומר לכם, זה פשוט שקר.
The Prime Minister outlined the second phase, which, if materialized, would essentially see Israel achieve all of its war goals.
עכשיו, בשלב השני, החמאס יפורק מנשקו והרצועה תפורז. זה יקרה או בדרך מדינית לפי תוכנית טראמפ, או בדרך צבאית על ידינו. גם את זה אמרתי בוושינגטון.
Netanyahu reiterated his stance that only Israel's military pressure combined with Washington's diplomatic moves is what made this deal possible.
כדי להחזיר את 48 חטופינו הנותרים, הנחיתי לפני כמה שבועות את צה"ל להיכנס למעוז החשוב ביותר של החמאס, העיר עזה. במקביל, תיאמתי עם הנשיא טראמפ וצוותו מהלך מדיני שהפך בן רגע את הקערה. במקום שישראל תבודד, החמאס מבודד. וכתוצאה מהלחץ הצבאי העצים שהפעלנו והלחץ המדיני, החמאס נלחץ להסכים לתוכנית שהבאנו.
The remarks by Prime Minister Netanyahu followed dramatic developments over the weekend led by U.S. President Donald Trump to bring the Gaza war to an end and return all Israeli hostages within days. U.S. President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social late Saturday night that Israel had agreed to the initial withdrawal line, which the U.S. had shared with Hamas. Awaiting Hamas's confirmation, the ceasefire will be immediately effective and the hostages and prisoner exchange will begin, paving the way for the next phase. This marks another step forwards towards the implementation of President Trump's potential agreement, which he said will end the, quote, 3,000-year catastrophe. Over the weekend, Trump announced the agreement, describing it as a big day.
I want to thank the countries that helped me put this together: Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and so many others. So many people fought so hard. This is a big day. We'll see how it all turns out.
Indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas are set to begin tomorrow in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff is on his way, and the Israeli team, led by Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, is preparing to depart. Senior U.S. and Israeli officials are saying that if the talks go smoothly, the hostages could be freed within a few days. The plan, coordinated directly between Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, calls for a tactical Israeli withdrawal, with the IDF remaining in most of Gaza while all hostages are released immediately.
We have to get the final word down in concrete. Very importantly, I look forward to having the hostages come home to their parents and having some of the hostages, unfortunately, you know the condition they're in, come home likewise to their parents, because their parents wanted them just as much as though that young man or young woman were alive.
Hamas has signaled partial acceptance under heavy pressure from the United States and Arab states. Trump had given the group until tonight to agree fully or face, quote, grave consequences.
So I just want to let you know that this is a very special day, maybe unprecedented in many ways. It is unprecedented, but thank you all, and thank you all to those great countries that helped. We were given a tremendous amount of help. Everybody was unified in wanting this war to end and seeing peace in the Middle East, and we're very close to achieving that. Thank you all, and everybody will be treated fairly.
And following orders from the political echelon, the IDF is taking defensive positions in Gaza and has halted the offensive in Gaza City. The army remains deep inside the Strip and remains ready to respond to any threats or provocations. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir ordered the Israeli army to prepare for the implementation of the first stage of U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza and free the remaining Israeli hostages. The IDF statement read, in accordance with the directives from the political echelon, the Chief of the General Staff instructed to advance readiness for the implementation of the first phase of the Trump plan for the release of the hostages. At the same time, it was emphasized that the safety of IDF troops is a top priority and that all IDF capabilities will be allocated to the Southern Command to ensure the protection of the troops. The moves by the IDF chief came after statements from Trump and Hamas signaling a possible breakthrough. Zamir held an urgent meeting with top generals for what the army called a special situational assessment in light of the developments. The Trump agreement allows the IDF to remain deployed in Gaza during the first phase of the agreement. Zamir told commanders to maintain maximum readiness and rapid response to any threat during this sensitive period. The move to a defensive posture came after Trump publicly called on Israel to stop airstrikes as he pushes to finalize his peace and hostage release proposal. Meanwhile, the IDF has issued a stark warning to Palestinians not to return to Gaza City, calling the area a dangerous combat zone. IDF troops are still encircling the city, and the military continues targeted defensive strikes against imminent threats.
The Trump plan to end the war in Gaza is receiving strong backing from key players within the Arab and Muslim world, as well as from the United Nations and Western world leaders. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey are pressing for the deal. The Palestinian Authority and the UN are also expressing strong support for President Trump's Gaza Peace Initiative. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas welcomed Hamas's positive response to the plan, calling it a crucial step towards a ceasefire, the release of the hostages, and the reconstruction of Gaza under Palestinian leadership. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Hamas is ready for peace, describing the moment as a rare window of opportunity for the region. And in Geneva, UN Rights Chief Volker Turk called the Trump plan a vital opportunity to end the bloodshed once and for all, urging all parties to act in good faith. Interesting how some of these countries are jumping on board the so-called peace agreement, even though they have been inciting towards terrorism against Israel for years and years and continue to do so even as we speak. And joining us now with more on U.S. President Trump's peace plan is Ari Harrow, former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Ari, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lidar.
So, you know the Prime Minister well. You've been in these sort of closed-door negotiations alongside him at the White House before. You have, I would say, unique insight into sort of the processes. There's so much noise, so much misinformation surrounding Trump's plan and how it came to be. I want to ask you, what is the bottom line? What goes on behind the closed doors?
Well, I think what we're witnessing is actually an intense relationship like no other that we've seen in the history of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And as such, the level of coordination and the level of communication between the White House and the Prime Minister's office today is unprecedented. As such, a plan like the one we're seeing today is definitely something that was discussed back and forth and agreed upon before it was shown the light of day.
And there are still a lot of questions. First and foremost, of course, Hamas's response, which said yes to some aspects and no to sort of some of the core tenets of the plan. I mean, what do you make of this?
I don't find it at all surprising. We are very familiar here in Israel with the fact that, first and foremost, Hamas is a murderous, treacherous terrorist organization. Their goal, their stated goal, is the destruction of the state of Israel, the murder of Jews, not only in Israel, of course, but globally. And as such, any type of dealings with them is going to be, I would say, the opposite of smooth sailing. I understand that the current plan that we're seeing really has succeeded to a certain degree so far just because of the leverage that President Trump and the United States have been able to bring on the broader Muslim world and the Gulf states that trickles down to Hamas. But in dealing with Hamas as its own entity, we should never forget, not even for a second, who we're really dealing with.
And why now? I mean, why is this plan coming together now? Why not a year ago? I mean, why now?
So I think there's a number of different opportunities that sort of came together. Firstly, there was a window after Israel and the U.S. attacked the Iranian nuclear installations. But at that point, Hamas still felt that they could hold out longer. And part of that, mind you, is because of the support that they received from European capitals that expressed willingness and action towards recognizing a Palestinian state. When Israeli spokespeople spoke out and said, you are giving a prize to terror by recognizing Palestinian statehood, this is exactly what they were referring to. And as such, instead of bringing the war closer to an end, instead of bringing the hostages closer to being home, they actively pushed it away. And I think that when those countries saw that the United States was not budging, when Israel took decisive action by targeting Hamas leaders in Qatar, when Israel took decisive action by sending troops into Gaza City, I think they realized that time is running out. And once President Trump was able to recruit, most specifically, Turkey and Qatar, where the Hamas foreign leadership situates itself, and recognizing that they may no longer be welcome in those capitals, did Hamas realize that this is a hand that has been fully played.
All right, Ari Harrow, thank you so much for joining us today and for your unique insights.
My pleasure.
On October 7, I was here at the Nova Music Festival. I ran for my life, hid for 7 hours. Terrorists shot me twice. Thankfully, I survived. I'm still dealing with trauma, and I'm not alone. 3 million Israelis are in trauma. They need mental health care or physical rehabilitation. Wounded soldiers, families, and scared children.
And moving on, tens of thousands gathered in Tel Aviv last night to rally for a ceasefire hostage deal, as the U.S.-led proposal to end the Gaza war appears to be moving forward. A huge placard held above the crowd read, "It's now or never," echoing the message of U.S. President Donald Trump and posting images of the banner. With negotiations expected to begin soon, hostage families are calling this a decisive moment, sending a united message: bring them all home. The families say these are days that will determine whether the living hostages return for rehabilitation and the deceased returned for proper burial. They're thanking President Trump for his initiative and calling on Israeli leaders to seize this opportunity. The families of the Israeli hostages expressed cautious optimism.
And yet we must remember that on the other side of the fence, there is a terrorist organization that killed, butchered, slaughtered, tortured, and still tortured after kidnapping. And we need to make sure we, the Western countries, our allies, the mediators, of course Israel, we have to make sure that this deal goes all the way through. I have no expectations of these murderers, but we, the Western world, must make sure that this deal comes through this time all the way till the end, until my cousin Tal is back home.
I'm calling President Trump, please do everything, put any pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu and also on the Hamas to make it happen. We've got to finish this war. We've got to bring them all back home now, not tomorrow, now, right now.
We are going to the cemetery on Monday. We have so many to pay, so many dear ones to pay respect to. It's not an easy week, but we're holding for the hope that this is going to end. We want our lives back. We want our normal daily life back. We want the region to heal.
And on October 16th, ILTV News and the Jewish Agency for Israel will mark 2 years since the October 7th massacre with a powerful 90-minute broadcast. This special event will share survivor testimonies, stories of resilience, and the unity of Jewish communities worldwide. Join us as we honor the victims, support the families, and stand together for Israel's future. Scan the QR code now to sign up and be part of this meaningful program. And moving on, Thursday's terrorist attack on the Manchester synagogue, in which 2 Jewish worshippers were killed, and has left many in the Jewish community questioning their safety and future in the UK.
The Manchester synagogue attack dominated headlines in the UK over the weekend, with the attacker being named by police as Jihad al-Shami, a 35-year-old British citizen of Syrian descent and alleged rapist who was shot dead at the scene by police officers. The perpetrator's father, Faraj al-Shami, is a trauma surgeon. He tried to distance the family from his son's attack, calling it a profound shock and saying they strongly condemn this heinous act. But old social media posts have since emerged showing the father's support and glorification of terrorism, including Hamas's October 7th attacks. On Friday, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer visited the site of the attack, pledging that his government will rise to the challenge to defeat anti-Semitism. The government has deployed hundreds of extra police officers around synagogues and Jewish institutions in the UK, but many in the Jewish community say this is not the way and are calling out on the UK government to stand firm against terror and radical Islam. Starmer attempted to do so, issuing a statement calling on protesters not to take to the streets out of respect for British Jews, but his polite request fell on deaf ears. As just one day after the shooting, mass anti-Israel protests in London took place, with hundreds detained for glorifying terrorism. As such, in light of the British government's perceived weakness against terror, anti-Semitism, and radical Islam, many Jews are now questioning their future in the UK.
It's very difficult to articulate at this moment in time how the Jewish community is feeling. For 2 years now, we have felt lonely and isolated. We've raised this issue of high levels of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic hate crime targeting Jewish people, and at times there's been very little solidarity and support from people who should know better. So at this moment in time, we are calling out to everyone to wrap their arms around the Jewish community and show us that support, because make no mistake, Jewish people here are actively questioning whether we have a future in the United Kingdom and whether this country is going to be as welcoming to our children as it has been to myself and my family over many generations.
More headlines for the Samud flotilla this week as Greta Thunberg and her partners in crime, who illegally tried to break a maritime blockade and sail into a war zone, have been detained. And now, after sailing on a party boat where Israeli authorities found condom wrappers and booze, they are decrying their treatment here in Israel. Thunberg claiming the beds are uncomfortable, that there are bed bugs, and she's not being given enough food to satisfy her appetite. All this according to a letter sent by the Swedish embassy to her family, after Swedish officials were allowed to meet with her in her detention cell. Really? Well, cry me a river. I have to say the audacity of this privileged girl is unbelievable. She knowingly broke the law for the second time, pulling off nothing more than a publicity stunt. Her aid convoy? Well, it turns out it didn't even have any aid.
I'm inside one of the vessels, one of the largest vessels to come in this Yom Kippur flotilla. And while we're processing this boat, there's one thing missing, guys. All this aid that they were supposed to bring into Gaza, which explains one thing to me, I'm sure it explains to you, that when we and multiple other countries offered them to take this aid and bring it to the Gazans, we could facilitate its safe arrival, they flat out rejected it. And now we know why, because it was never about bringing aid to Gazans, but it was all about the headlines and the social media followings.
And for the Israel haters watching, yes, the flotilla group even confirmed in a statement that there was little to no aid on board. So why the stunt? Because Greta and her friends know full well that Israel will not mistreat them. Israel will simply send them back on their merry way so they can continue to smear Israel and attempt to break the law all over again. Officials were allowed to meet with Greta. What about the hostages? There are currently 20 hostages still alive in Gaza. They are emaciated, starving, being tortured, not by being given an uncomfortable bed, but really, actually brutally beaten and tortured. They have no food, little water, and some have not seen sunlight for nearly 2 years because they are being held in an underground dungeon. So Greta, spare us all this entitled whining and complaining. You are a criminal, you are a liar, and you have no idea what real suffering. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the nation last night and for the first time expressed optimism that all the hostages will soon be home. Netanyahu signaled strong support for the Trump peace plan for Gaza, describing it as a very significant achievement for Israel. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Addressing the nation last night, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israel is on the verge of a very significant achievement, and he hopes to announce the return of the hostages held by Hamas very soon.
אנחנו על סף הישג גדול מאוד. זה עדיין לא סופי. אנחנו עובדים על כך במרץ, ואני מקווה בעזרת השם שבימים הקרובים, עוד במהלך חג הסוכות, אוכל לבשר לכם על השבת כל חטופינו, החיים והחללים כאחד, בפעימה אחת, כשצה"ל נשאר בעומק הרצועה ובשטחים השולטים בה.
Ahead of mediated negotiations due to begin in Cairo, Netanyahu said that he instructed the Israeli negotiating team to make the process as short as possible, noting that President Trump will not tolerate stalling tactics, delays, or evasions by Hamas.
אני הנחיתי את צוות המשא ומתן בראשות השר דרמר לצאת למצרים כדי לסגור את הפרטים הטכניים של שחרור חטופינו. הכוונה שלנו, והכוונה של ידידינו האמריקנים, היא לתחום את המשא ומתן הזה בימים בודדים. ושמעתם את הנשיא טראמפ הערב. הוא אמר בבירור, לא נסבול לו תרגילי דחייה, משיכת זמן או התחמקות מצד החמאס.
In his address, the Prime Minister outlined the phases of the agreement, reiterating that the first stage will see the immediate release of the remaining 48 hostages.
בשלב הראשון, החמאס ישחרר את כל חטופינו, וכוחות צה"ל ייפרסו מחדש באופן שצה"ל ימשיך להחזיק בכל השטחים השולטים בעומק הרצועה. אני שומע שיש כאלה שאומרים היום שהחמאס היה מוכן כבר לפני שנה או אפילו לפני שנתיים לשחרר את כל חטופינו מבלי שניסוג נסיגה מלאה מהרצועה. טוב, אני אומר לכם, זה פשוט שקר.
The Prime Minister outlined the second phase, which, if materialized, would essentially see Israel achieve all of its war goals.
עכשיו, בשלב השני, החמאס יפורק מנשקו והרצועה תפורז. זה יקרה או בדרך מדינית לפי תוכנית טראמפ, או בדרך צבאית על ידינו. גם את זה אמרתי